So Volt's, basically a multi-commodity battery minerals company with a focus on graphite, and we've been working, on an integrated supply chain from mines to actually manufacturing of coated spheronized purified graphite or battery anode material to supply to cell makers. So that strategy is still on foot, and even with recent events in Ukraine, which we'll talk a bit about, I think we can still see that there's a pathway for Volt through to implement its strategy. So when we talk about multi-commodities, we have our graphite assets, and we also have lithium license applications in Serbia. They're basically a Serbian election coming up, so those license applications tend to get held up while the election passes. New ministers, potentially new bureaucrats are appointed, and then the process sort of starts post-election. So we have our graphite assets in Ukraine and also in Tanzania, and we've been doing a lot of work, particularly in the United States, actually. So while we still have a focus on getting into downstream production in the EU, we've just found that our position in the United States has been such that we have a really good technical partnership there. We have had some excellent discussions, and we have a gigafactory development that we're involved in, and other discussions with cell makers in relation to becoming basically a producer of battery anode material. So in addition to that, in the States, we've also advanced to looking at opportunities in the what we call the non-spherical space, which is the remnant material after you've spheronized to produce battery anode material. You do get what's treated as a low-value byproduct by most processors in China, but we've seen an opportunity to create high-value products that could be used in the alkaline battery space and in the lead-acid battery space as well. So we get, for every ton of graphite we feed into the plant, we get a ton of high-value product at the back end, which substantially improves the economics of these CSPG facilities. Done a lot of work and still doing a lot of work in the ESG space, so we'll be making some further announcements around policies, principles, and how we cascade our approach to ESG right through the organisation, and that includes at the mine sites and at the CSPG facilities. And we have a pretty experienced management team and support staff involved. Won't spend a lot of time on a corporate overview. Obviously, with events of the last week, our share price has been pretty heavily impacted by the Ukraine situation, but I think the reality is that Volt's got a lot more to its portfolio than just the Ukraine assets. We're not walking away from those, and we hope that we're going to see an outcome in the Ukraine that will stop the fighting, stop the hostilities, that the deaths, and that will stop as well. And we're primarily concerned for the safety and well-being of our staff over there. And we don't know what the outcome's going to be, but we're certainly still supporting our staff. We own this 70% of this asset, and it's not, the asset itself is well out of the way of any fighting. It's right over on the western side of Ukraine near Moldova, so it's actually fairly quiet there. And while we've suspended operations for the last week or so, we've also sent everybody home for their safety, and probably more concerned about our Kiev staff and their well-being as well. So not much more we can say on that right now, apart from obviously we are concerned, and we continue to monitor the situation, and we're hopeful that ultimately there'll be a pathway forward, and we can get on with the business and provide jobs and the sort of benefits that come from the mine for the local community and for the Ukrainians. this is our sort of basically still our strategy. So as I said, we're not walking away from the Ukraine. You can see that there's an operating mine and processing plant. Part of the strategy was to supply, graphite products into Europe and into the US from Ukraine. We have our Bunyu mine development, which is at the funding phase, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The idea there is we could supply also from Tanzania into Europe and USA, and in the Europe and the USA, we'd be developing these downstream processing facilities. I think just to talk, people would have seen this graphic quite a few times, but it shows the level of demand, and it's interesting talking to marketing and trading groups, while just more recently in relation to the Bunyu funding. But the commentary is pretty much last year and early part of this year, it's all been about lithium and cobalt supply. So with cell makers looking to and car makers looking to secure their supply there, but the view is that this year will be the year of graphite. So Zavalievsky, like I said, we're not walking away from this. It's a great asset. Obviously, the future's uncertain, but we have a long life mining license up to November 2035. Subset resource of 22.9 million tonnes. We can't talk about the sort of Russian code resource, but it's a multiple of that number. So this is a big graphite resource in Europe when there's not a lot of them. And this was seen in our discussions with the European Raw Materials Alliance and other financial institutions that we've had to date, that this was seen as a pretty key graphite supply asset, and we were having some good discussions along the way. They still continue because I think everybody hopes that there will be a resolution of the activities there. Pretty good grade, 6.8% carbon, or great transport infrastructure, experienced workforce, and they make a high purity product. And we had basically sort of an indirect 79% interest in most of the freehold land where all the infrastructure is located. It's a turnaround asset for us, and there was more work to do this year, and we were looking at quite a substantial increase in sales. But as I said, we'll just at the moment have to look at what the outcomes will be there, and then we can make some plans from there in relation to that asset. The Bunyu project, one of the biggest graphite resources in the world, only 6% of the area are explored, but already the biggest by tonnes, the biggest resource in Tanzania. If we kept exploring, we could probably push this thing right through to being one of the, if not the biggest graphite deposit globally. So it's world class, in a great location, only 140 k's by road to ports, and this is a project that deserves to be developed. It's been a difficult sort of process in Tanzania for a number of years. That's become a lot better over the last 12 months with new president in place, and we've seen certainly increased interest in financing. Where we're at right now is that we have two different financiers that are prepared to put a funding proposal to us, but only on the basis that we rotate or pivot out of our existing offtakes, which are with private Chinese processors, and look to more Western world, or it could be a listed Chinese group, or potentially even, I guess, East Asia, South Korea or Japanese would tick the box. So that's not an easy thing. You would think in the current environment that might be simple, but there's quite a process to do offtakes for graphite. And bear in mind, the car makers and the cell makers aren't buying graphite, they're buying processed material, they're buying CSPG, so they're not coming right up the chain here. So most of your discussions are with groups that might want it to make CSPG material or more in traditional markets. So those markets aren't growing as quickly as what the battery market is. So, and there's only certain types of graphite products that fit into the CSPG feedstock. So it's more complex than what people think. I know everybody wants an end date, but I can't do that apart from saying that we've got discussions underway. There's a process that we're working through, and it'll, I'm confident we'll get there, but I can't sort of give a firm timeline on that right now. Project itself has all of its approvals in place, mining licenses covering both stage 1, which is a smaller scale development, and was, basically a strategy to try and keep the capex or total funding costs down, and that you don't have to try and sell 100 or 200,000 tonnes of product in a much larger project in a softer market. Bear in mind, graphite, up until recently has been a market that was, a bit difficult to place large volume tonnages into as well. So yeah, we're in a good spot. So the two investors, one's an African or debt providers, one's an African development bank and the other one's a non-bank financial institution. We also have an equity participant identified who will do, the top-up amount and take a project equity position, but that won't become live until we put our debt funding. So we position this whole thing to be fully funded, and so over the coming weeks and perhaps into the next quarter, we will hopefully see some developments around offtakes and those funding proposals. Okay, I think I'd like to talk a bit about our CSPG production strategy. So, and like I said, there's a lot of work been going on in the United States. So this pretty clearly outlines what we're doing. We've got a great technical partnership with American Energy Technologies. These guys have all the IP around how to make coated, spheronized, purified graphite. You can go to try and do it yourself. That will take a lot of work and there's a lot of risk attached to it. These guys have a small scale operating plant. And they also have the technology around these other products that I'll talk about in a minute. So this is a key relationship for us. They're based in Chicago. They have a really strong team, a whole bunch of PhDs and scientists, basically. This whole area is electrochemistry. So there's not people just wandering around that you can pick up to get this sort of IP. And it drives a lot of the discussions that we've had and the confidence in Volt being able to get through and become a CSPG producer. So we're going to start a DFS soon on the actual facility. So I'm talking to an engineering group, just finalising scope, and we'll announce that soon. And that'll bring out the economics on these sort of facilities, and a little bit on that in the next page. And obviously ATC will be a key part of that. So they can provide technical information. They've done the flow sheet, that we've done equipment selection, and they can help train our team as well as once we get into an operating environment here. Lithium-ion battery gigafactory, we've announced our involvement with energy supply developments, two industry, really key known industry people involved at the head of this with Jeff Yambrick and Bob Gallion. There'll be more announcements on this in the near future, including who the other participants is. So this is not just Volt on its own with one other group. There's another 10 groups involved in this development. They've got the property site being selected, so that's holding up. They want to actually say where it's going to be located before they go their full public release, which will be in a matter of weeks. And people will get to see some of the other participants in it, including the cell maker. We're the incumbent graphite producer and supplier of CSPG in this facility. So it's planned to get to 50 gigawatts, and this is from the cell maker in terms of their target. You will need about 60,000 tonnes a year of CSPG, priced at about $8,000 a tonne, which you'll see on the next page. This is a significant asset and opportunity for Volt. So I think, in terms of looking at what is the value of Volt and the sum of the parts, then people need to be looking at this area, because this is key for Volt, and in fact will be a bigger value driver than the graphite projects, and particularly with our plans to develop other opportunities in that and also in Europe. But at the moment, we're probably making more advances in the US. alkaline battery announcement will be done soon. It's taken a bit longer to finalise the agreement with UEP, mainly because it's a three-way between AETC, Volt and Urban Electric Power, but there's IP and various other things tied up in it, but we're pretty close and we'll make an announcement on that soon. Lead acid battery will announce who we're dealing with there, but that test work's been going on for a few months. And again, a high value byproduct out of making lithium-ion battery SPG. And as I said, we're looking at other developments and particularly opportunities in Europe as well. This is our sort of go-to-market strategy, the vertical integration. And you can see in the various steps at the top, it's ore to graphite concentrate, from graphite concentrate through to uncoated products, and these other byproducts in graphite coatings and additives that come out of the spheronization process. We have a high yield of spheronized material that will go to lithium-ion batteries at 70%, but the other 30%, we found that there's opportunities to place those into the alkaline and lead acid battery space as high value added products. And then at the bottom, the coating technology, which again AETC has, and the ability to coat, and it's quite a sophisticated sort of technique. So there's not a lot of companies in the world outside of, in fact, there's virtually none outside of China. Bear in mind that China is, pretty much the sole supplier of coated spheronized purified graphite material. So there's a drive on in Europe and the US to look at other, potential suppliers, and this is the position we've put ourselves in. You can see the pricing once you get through to that is about $8,000 a tonne. You've got to wait for the study before we can put a full project value on it. But if you look around, you'll see most other producers are sort of sitting around that $3,000 a tonne or above to produce, maybe 3.5. So when you start talking 60,000 tonnes required for the gigafactory, and some other offtake discussions we're having as well in the US, the value of this business is very, very large. That's pretty much it. I think I'm on time, Timothy, but so we see that Volt is, a lot more in the sum of the parts. We think, we have a lot of assets that still can create a lot of value for shareholders, even given the situation in Europe, in the Ukraine. And we look forward to providing further updates to the market on all of these activities, and we'll see a lot of news flow even over the coming month about these US developments as well.